The sun was setting over Los Angeles as Keanu Reeves pulled up to the television studio. He stepped out of his car, not a fancy sports car like many might expect from a Hollywood star, but a modest black sedan. He nodded at the security guard, who recognized him immediately. "Evening, Mr. Reeves," the guard said with a smile. "Hey, thanks for keeping everything safe," Keanu replied, the corners of his eyes crinkling as he smiled back. Tonight was just another stop on the press tour for his new action movie. After decades in Hollywood, these promotional appearances had become routine, but Keanu never treated them that way. Each interview was a chance to connect with fans who supported his work, and he took that seriously. As he walked through the back entrance, he carried a small backpack rather than having an assistant trailing behind with his things. That was Keanu's way, straightforward, no unnecessary fuss. He'd arrived early, another habit from his years in the industry. Better to be waiting than to keep others waiting, he always thought. In the green room, a production assistant with bright red hair and a clipboard approached him nervously. "Mr. Reeves, it's such an honor. I'm Lily. I'll be helping you tonight. Can I get you anything? Water, coffee?" "Just water would be great, thanks. And please call me Keanu," he said, taking a seat on the couch. As Lily hurried off, Keanu pulled out the worn paperback he'd been reading on the drive over. It was a book on Buddhist philosophy, dog-eared in several places. He'd always been interested in different perspectives on life and meaning, something few interviewers ever asked him about. The door opened again and the show's producer walked in, a tall woman with glasses and a no-nonsense attitude. "Keanu, thanks for coming. Tom is really excited to have you on tonight," she said, referring to the host of Late Night with Tom Carter, one of the most popular talk shows in America. "Happy to be here," Keanu replied, setting his book down. "We'll go through the usual. Your new movie, maybe some John Wick questions, and Tom might ask about that motorcycle collection of yours. He's a big fan of vintage bikes too." Keanu nodded, used to the routine. What he didn't know was that Tom had other plans. The host had built his reputation on creating viral moments, pushing celebrities out of their comfort zones for the sake of entertainment. His team had noticed something unusual when Keanu arrived, a simple silver cross hanging from a chain around his neck. The producer spotted it too. "That's new, isn't it?" she asked, pointing to the necklace. Keanu's hand moved to touch the cross briefly. "Not really. I just don't usually wear it outside." There was something in his voice that suggested it wasn't just jewelry. But the producer didn't press further. In the makeup room, two artists worked quickly, applying the minimal makeup needed for the bright studio lights. Keanu sat patiently, thanking them for their work. One of them, an older woman who had been doing makeup for celebrities for over 20 years, appreciated his manners. "You know, in all my years doing this job, you're still one of the nicest people to come through here," she said as she powdered his face. Keanu looked genuinely surprised by the compliment. "I'm just grateful for your skill," he replied. "You make everyone look better than they are." As the makeup artist worked, Keanu closed his eyes. These quiet moments before going on stage were precious to him. The world saw him as this action star, the guy from The Matrix and John Wick, but few got to see the thoughtful person behind those roles. He fingered the cross necklace again, a recent gift that held special meaning. Meanwhile, in his dressing room, Tom Carter was reviewing note cards with his writers. The show had been slipping in ratings lately, and they needed something to boost numbers. "So we'll start with the movie talk. Standard stuff," one writer was saying, "but then pivot to the personal life angle. We noticed Reeves is wearing some kind of religious jewelry tonight." Tom perked up. "Really? That's interesting. He's never struck me as the religious type." "Could be good for a laugh," another writer suggested. "Your whole organized religion is for sheep bit would play well here." Tom considered this. His brand of comedy often pushed boundaries, and he wasn't afraid of controversy. If anything, it usually helped his viewership. "Let's keep it in our back pocket. See how the conversation flows." Back in the green room, Keanu finished his water as a stagehand knocked on the door. "5 minutes, Mr. Reeves." Keanu stood up, straightened his simple black suit, and took a deep breath. He never quite got used to the butterflies before live television. People assumed he was this confident, unshakable person because of his movie roles. But the real Keanu still got nervous like anyone else. As he waited by the stage entrance, he could hear the audience cheering for the previous segment. The energy of a live studio audience was always electric, unpredictable. He liked that part, the realness of it. Movies were controlled environments, but live TV could go anywhere. The floor director approached with a headset. Ready, Mr. Reeves? After the commercial break, Tom will introduce you, and you'll walk out to Mark X on the stage. Got it, Keanu said with a nod. The monitors nearby showed Tom Carter wrapping up a segment with a cooking celebrity. Tom was known for his sharp wit and sometimes cutting humor. He had a way of making guests either look really good or really uncomfortable, depending on his mood and their responses. As the show went to commercial, Tom walked over to the side stage where Keanu was waiting. Keanu, man, it's great to have you here, Tom said, extending his hand with a bright television smile. Thanks for having me, Keanu replied, shaking his hand firmly. Your new movie looks intense. Lots to talk about there, Tom said. Then his eyes drifted down to the cross necklace visible at Keanu's collar. Something shifted in his expression, a slight gleam that Keanu didn't notice. Should be a fun interview. Before Keanu could respond, Tom was called back to his mark on stage. The floor director started counting down from 10, and the familiar theme music began to play. And we're back. My next guest is one of Hollywood's most beloved action stars. You know him from The Matrix, John Wick, and now his new film Deadline Run. Please welcome Keanu Reeves. The audience erupted in applause as Keanu walked out onto the stage waving politely. He moved with that distinctive walk that fans recognized immediately. Not quite a swagger, but confident and slightly laid back. He smiled genuinely at the audience's warm reception. Tom stood to greet him, and they shook hands again before both sitting down. The audience's applause gradually died down. Keanu Reeves, everyone, Tom said, gesturing toward him as the final cheers faded. Man, that's quite a welcome. It's very nice, Keanu said, looking out at the audience with appreciation. Thank you all. So, Deadline Run, this movie looks absolutely insane. You're doing your own stunts again at, what are you now, over 50? Keanu laughed. Yeah, but don't remind me. My knees definitely know it. The audience laughed along with him. There was something so likable about Keanu's humility. There's this one scene where you're riding a motorcycle down what looks like the side of a building. Was that really you? It was. We had safety wires, of course, Keanu explained, his hands moving as he talked. But yeah, that was a real building, real motorcycle. Our stunt coordinator is amazing at figuring out how to make these impossible things possible. Tom leaned forward. You know, most actors your age have long since handed all that over to the younger stunt guys. What keeps driving you to do this crazy stuff? It was a good question, and Keanu took a moment to consider it. The audience waited in attentive silence. I think it's about honoring the character and the story, he finally said. When audiences see that it's really me in those moments, there's a different kind of connection. Plus, he added with a small smile, it's honestly still fun. The conversation flowed naturally as they discussed the film, Keanu's preparation for the role, and some funny behind-the-scenes stories. The audience was engaged, laughing at the right moments, clearly enjoying the easy chemistry between host and guest. What they couldn't see was that Tom was building to something. Each question was moving them closer to the personal territory he wanted to explore. His eyes occasionally flickered to the silver cross that caught the studio lights when Keanu moved. As a clip from the new movie played on the monitors, Tom whispered to Keanu, "Great stuff so far. Audience loves you." Keanu nodded appreciatively, unaware that the next segment would take a turn no one was expecting. The clip ended and the cameras returned to the two men sitting on stage. The mood was warm and positive, but as Tom prepared his next question, there was a subtle shift in his posture, a sharper glint in his eye. No one, not the audience, not the producers, and certainly not Keanu himself, was prepared for what would come next. The studio lights felt a little warmer as Tom Carter leaned back in his chair, a casual smile playing on his lips. The interview had been going smoothly, perhaps too smoothly for a host known for creating edgy viral moments. Tom glanced at his note cards, then set them aside. He was going off script. "So, Keanu," Tom said, his tone shifting slightly, "I couldn't help but notice you're wearing something a bit unusual tonight." He pointed toward Keanu's neck. "Is that a cross?" The camera zoomed in on the simple silver cross hanging from the chain around Keanu's neck. It wasn't flashy or ornate, just a plain, modest symbol that caught the studio lights. "Yeah, it is," Keanu replied simply, his hand moving to touch it briefly. "I have to say I'm surprised," Tom continued, His eyebrows raised. You never struck me as the religious type. More of a, what was that movie? The Day the Earth Stood Still? More of a space alien kind of guy. A few audience members laughed, but it was noticeably less enthusiastic than before. Something in the air had changed. Keanu smiled politely. Well, people are often more complicated than they appear. Tom nodded, but there was a glint in his eye that suggested he wasn't going to let this go. So what is this? A recent conversion? Did someone get to you? He turned to the audience with an exaggerated expression. Ladies and gentlemen, has Hollywood's favorite action hero found religion? More scattered laughter, but also some uncomfortable shifting in seats. The floor director exchanged a glance with the producer, who was watching from the side of the stage with growing concern. Keanu remained calm, his face betraying little emotion. It's not really about religion for me, he began, but Tom cut him off. Let me guess, it's a fashion choice? Hollywood's bringing back the 90s, right? Next week you'll have WWJD bracelets? Tom laughed at his own joke, but the audience response was tepid at best. In the control room, the show's executive producer spoke urgently into his headset. What is he doing? This wasn't in the segment plan. Tell him to move on. But Tom either didn't hear the direction in his earpiece or chose to ignore it. He was on a roll now, his comedy taking on an edge that felt increasingly mean-spirited. You know what's funny, Tom continued, leaning forward, is how many celebrities suddenly find God when their career hits a certain point. It's like the ultimate PR move. Your publicist recommend that? A few gasps came from the audience. This was crossing a line and everyone could feel it. The cameraman, focusing on Keanu's face, noticed something change in the actor's expression. Not anger, but something deeper, more thoughtful. The cameraman had filmed hundreds of celebrities over the years, and he recognized authentic emotion when he saw it. Backstage, Lily, the red-haired production assistant, whispered to her colleague, "Should someone stop this? This is getting really uncomfortable." Her colleague, a veteran of late-night TV, shook his head. Tom's the star. Nobody stops Tom mid-show no matter what. Besides, he added with a cynical shrug, drama means ratings. On stage, Tom seemed to be enjoying himself, warming to his theme. I mean, no offense, Keanu, but these days religion seems like such a, what's the word? Anachronism? Something people cling to because they can't face reality. He mimed, clutching a security blanket, earning a few uncomfortable laughs from the audience. A woman in the front row was visibly cringing, her face a mixture of embarrassment and secondhand discomfort. Keanu took a deep breath. His hand went to the cross again, this time holding it for a moment between his fingers. He wasn't angry. In fact, his face showed remarkable composure, but there was a new intensity to his presence. It's interesting you see it that way, he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting through Tom's bombastic energy. Tom, momentarily thrown by Keanu's calm response, recovered quickly. Oh, come on. You're a smart guy, Keanu. You've played characters who literally battle against systems of control. And what's organized religion but the ultimate system of control? The producer was now frantically signaling from offstage, drawing her finger across her throat in the universal cut-it-out gesture. This was veering into territory that could alienate a huge portion of their audience, not to mention potentially offending one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. But Tom was in too deep now. I mean, what does that little trinket even mean to you? Is it just for the aesthetic? Or are you really buying into the whole, he waved his hands vaguely, thing? The discomfort in the studio was palpable. The makeup artist who had earlier complimented Keanu's kindness was watching on a backstage monitor, her hand covering her mouth in shock. I can't believe he's doing this, she whispered to no one in particular. In the audience, a middle-aged man leaned over to his wife and muttered, This is painful to watch. Poor Keanu. On stage, Keanu shifted in his seat. He could have reacted in any number of ways. Anger, dismissal, awkward laughter, or even walking off the set. Any of these responses would have been understandable given the increasingly pointed mockery. Instead, he looked directly at Tom with clear eyes that held no hostility. Can I tell you something about this cross? He asked, his voice quiet but somehow filling the studio. Tom, perhaps sensing he had pushed too far or maybe just surprised by Keanu's composed reaction, nodded. Sure, educate me, he said, still keeping his sarcastic tone but with noticeably less edge. I'm not really what you'd call religious, Keanu began. I've never been good at following rules or systems, like you said. He looked down at the cross, gently touching it again. The camera zoomed in, capturing the moment in perfect focus. The director, sensing something powerful happening, called for a split screen to show both men's faces simultaneously. This was a gift, Keanu continued, from a little boy I met through the Make-A-Wish Foundation last year. His name was Danny. He was 10 years old and had been fighting cancer for almost half his life. The studio fell completely silent. Even Tom seemed at a loss for words, his usual quick comebacks failing him. Danny loved movies, especially action movies. He told me they helped him feel brave when he was scared about his treatments. Keanu's voice remained steady, but there was an undercurrent of emotion that everyone could feel. We spent a day together, and at the end he gave me this. It had been his grandfather's. Tom swallowed, visibly uncomfortable now. This was not the direction he had anticipated this segment taking. Danny told me his grandfather always said it wasn't about religion. It was about remembering that suffering isn't the end of the story, that there's something beyond the pain. Keanu looked back up at Tom. Danny died 3 months later. A collective breath seemed to be held throughout the studio. In the control room, nobody spoke. The executive producer had stopped giving directions. Even the normally bustling backstage area was still, everyone watching the monitors in silence. So when I wear this, it's not about some system of control or PR move, Keanu said, his voice still gentle but with unmistakable conviction. It's about a brave kid who taught me something about facing fear. It's about honoring a promise I made to remember what matters when things get tough. Tom Carter, for perhaps the first time in his broadcasting career, looked genuinely speechless. The cocky grin had vanished from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally managed to say, I didn't know. How could you? Keanu replied with surprising kindness. We all make assumptions about each other based on surface things. I do it too. Maybe that's why symbols like this still matter. They remind us there's usually a deeper story. The producer, sensing a moment that could either make or break the show, signaled to the floor director. A red light blinked on one of the cameras. They were about to cut to commercial. Tom, a professional despite his misstep, recognized the signal. We'll be right back with more from Keanu Reeves after this break, he said to camera, his voice lacking its usual confident flourish. As the on-air lights dimmed and the commercials began to roll, the studio remained unusually quiet. No one quite knew what to say. The floor director approached with water bottles for both men, moving awkwardly in the tense atmosphere. Tom leaned forward, off mic, his face showing genuine regret. Keanu, I'm sorry. That was way out of line. Keanu shook his head. It's okay. You didn't know. No, it's not okay, Tom insisted. I was being a jerk for cheap laughs. As the two men spoke quietly, the audience buzzed with conversation. Phones were out. People texting friends, posting on social media about what they'd just witnessed. One woman was openly wiping tears from her eyes. In the control room, the executive producer was on the phone with the network. Yes, I know what just happened. No, we couldn't stop it. But trust me, this is going to be everywhere by morning and not for the reasons you think. This might be the most genuine moment we've ever had on this show. As the commercial break neared its end, the makeup team rushed out to touch up both men. The artist working on Keanu whispered, "That was beautiful what you said." Keanu just nodded, a small smile on his lips. The story he'd told was true, every word of it. What no one in the studio knew was that he had never shared it publicly before. Something about Tom's mockery had prompted him to reveal what the cross really meant, rather than responding with anger or walking away. The floor director began the countdown for their return from break. We're back in 5, 4, 3. Tom straightened his tie, his face showing a mix of emotions, embarrassment, respect, and the slight panic of a host who had no idea how to recover from the moment that had just occurred. Keanu, however, looked perfectly calm. Whatever happened next, he had spoken his truth. The red light on camera 1 blinked back to life as the show returned from commercial break. The energy in the studio had completely transformed. What had started as just another celebrity interview had become something none of the audience members would soon forget. Tom Carter, usually the picture of television confidence, looked visibly different. The smirk that typically decorated his face had vanished, replaced by an expression that seemed almost humble. a word nobody in Hollywood would normally associate with him. "Welcome back to the show," Tom said, his voice softer than before. "We're here with Keanu Reeves, star of the new action film Deadline Run." He paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. "Keanu, I want to thank you for sharing that story about Danny and your necklace. That was really powerful." The audience, unsure how to respond to this new, sincere version of their usually sarcastic host, offered gentle applause. Many were still processing what they had witnessed during the previous segment. Keanu nodded, acknowledging Tom's words with grace. "Thanks for listening," he said simply. There was an awkward moment as Tom seemed to wrestle with whether to continue their previous conversation or pivot back to the planned interview questions about the movie. The floor director, sensing the uncertainty, pointed to a monitor showing a clip from the film that was ready to play. But before Tom could introduce the clip, Keanu leaned forward slightly. "You know, it's funny," he said, his deep voice carrying easily across the hushed studio. "I don't usually talk about these things publicly." Tom seized the opportunity. "Why did you decide to share it tonight?" Keanu considered the question, his eyes thoughtful. The audience watched in rapt attention, many leaning forward in their seats. "I think sometimes when we're challenged, our first instinct is to get defensive or angry," Keanu replied. "I've been doing that most of my life, but I've been trying to learn something different lately." A woman in the third row nodded unconsciously, captivated by his words. "I've had some difficult times in my life," Keanu continued. His fans knew this was an understatement. He had endured more personal tragedies than most could imagine, though he rarely spoke of them. "And what I've realized is that pain can either close you off or open you up." Tom, a man who built his career on quick jokes and witty comebacks, found himself speechless. The cynicism that was his trademark defense mechanism seemed to have temporarily deserted him. "Danny taught me something about that," Keanu said. "Here was this kid facing something impossible, something terrifying, and instead of becoming bitter, he was so open, so present." Keanu's fingers touched the cross again. "When he gave me this, he told me it helped him remember to stay open even when it hurt." The studio was absolutely silent. The camera operators, veteran professionals who had filmed countless celebrity interviews, found themselves moved by the rawness of the moment. One of them, a burly man in his 50s who had seen it all, felt an unexpected lump in his throat. "So when you asked about it, something in me just decided to stay open rather than close up," Keanu said to Tom. "Maybe that's what Danny would have done." In the control room, the executive producer whispered to his assistant, "Are you getting this? Tell me we're getting good shots of both of them." This wasn't the explosive viral moment they had anticipated, but he recognized they were capturing something far more valuable. Tom, finding his voice again, asked, "Do you think about him often, Danny?" Keanu's smile was gentle but tinged with sadness. "Every day. Not always consciously, but whenever I put this on." He touched the necklace. "It's strange how objects can carry meaning like that, isn't it? How something so small can hold something so big." A tear slid down the cheek of an older woman in the audience. She wasn't alone. Throughout the studio, people were being moved by the unexpected depth of the conversation. Tom nodded slowly. "I think I understand that. My father's watch," he started, then seemed surprised at himself for sharing something personal on air. It wasn't his style, but something about this moment was breaking through his carefully crafted persona. "You still have it?" Keanu asked, his interest genuine. "Yeah, in a drawer at home. I can't bring myself to wear it, but I can't let it go either." "Because it's not just a watch anymore," Keanu said with understanding. "Exactly." Tom looked almost relieved, as if Keanu had articulated something he had felt but never expressed. The floor director, aware they still had a show to produce, made a subtle gesture toward the monitor where the movie clip was queued up. But Tom, making a split-second decision that would later be discussed in every corner of the entertainment industry, waved him off. "You know what? Let's forget the clip for now," Tom said, both to Keanu and the audience. "I'd rather talk about something real if that's okay with you." The audience applauded, louder this time. This wasn't the show they had expected to see, but it was becoming something more memorable. Keanu, ever respectful of his professional obligations, said, "I'm happy to talk about the movie too. That's why I'm here after all." "We will," Tom assured him. But first I want to ask you something I've never asked a guest before." He took a breath as if stepping into unfamiliar territory.
"How do you stay so—"
I don't even know the word for it. Grounded, real? In an industry that practically rewards the opposite? In the front row, a young, aspiring actor who had waited months for tickets to the show leaned forward, eager for Keanu's answer. This was the kind of question he had always wanted to hear asked of his idol. Keanu ran a hand through his hair, taking a moment to consider the unexpected question. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I don't know if I am those things," he began, his humility evident. "But I try to remember that all of this, the fame, the movies, the attention, it's not real in the way that matters most." "What is real, then?" Tom asked, his usual sarcasm nowhere to be found. "Connections," Keanu said simply. "The moments when we truly see each other. Like with Danny. Those 10 hours I spent with him felt more real than months on some film sets." The makeup artist who had worked on Keanu earlier was watching from the wings, nodding in recognition. She had seen countless celebrities come through, most of them too self-absorbed to even learn her name. Keanu had asked about her children, remembered details from their brief conversation. "It's hard, though," Keanu continued. "It's easy to get caught up in it all. The reviews, the box office numbers, what people are saying online. I still do, all the time." Tom leaned back in his chair. "So what brings you back?" "From getting lost in all that?" "Simple things," Keanu said. "Riding my motorcycle. Reading a good book. Conversations with old friends who knew me before any of this happened." He gestured vaguely at the studio around them. "Friends who don't care what my last movie made." The audience laughed softly, appreciating his honesty. "And reminders," he added, touching the cross once more. "Physical things that connect me to what matters, like Danny's cross, or a letter from a teacher who believed in me when I was struggling in school." Tom, who had built his career on making celebrities uncomfortable with probing questions and sarcastic jabs, found himself nodding in genuine agreement. "I get that. I really do." The producer, watching from offstage, checked her watch. They would need to wrap up soon, but she was reluctant to end what had become the most authentic segment in the show's history. She signaled to Tom that they had 5 minutes left. Tom acknowledged the signal with a slight nod, then turned back to Keanu. "We should probably talk about your movie a bit before we run out of time. But I want to say something first." He cleared his throat, clearly venturing into unfamiliar territory. "I'm sorry about before. Making fun of your necklace, of faith in general. It was cheap and I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the audience. Tom Carter, the king of late-night snark, was apologizing on live television. Many exchanged glances of disbelief. Keanu's response was immediate and gracious. "No apology needed, man, honestly." But Tom shook his head. "No, it is needed. I've built a career on making fun of things I don't understand, and tonight I learned something from you. So thank you." The audience burst into applause, many rising to their feet. It wasn't just for Keanu now. It was for the unexpected authenticity of the moment, for the rare sight of genuine human connection playing out on a stage usually reserved for rehearsed anecdotes and promotional sound bites. As the applause continued, the camera caught a close-up of Keanu's face. There was no triumph there, no satisfaction at having changed the tone of the interview or even at receiving a public apology. There was only a quiet thoughtfulness and perhaps a touch of that same openness he had described learning from Danny. "So," Tom said as the applause died down, "tell us a bit about Deadline Run before we have to go." "I promise I'll actually listen this time." His self-deprecating tone earned a laugh from the audience. As Keanu began to talk about the film, his passion for the craft of filmmaking evident, something had shifted permanently in the studio. The cynicism that had dominated the show for years had been punctured, if only for one night, by something more powerful, genuine human connection. And somewhere, Keanu thought to himself, Danny would be smiling. By the time Keanu Reeves left the television studio, it was nearly midnight. The interview had run longer than scheduled, with the producers making the rare decision to extend the segment at the expense of other planned content. Nobody complained, not even the comedy duo who had been bumped to the following week's show. As Keanu walked to his car, several crew members stopped him to shake his hand. The burly cameraman who had fought back tears during the interview approached awkwardly. "Mr. Reeves," he said, extending a weathered hand, "just wanted to say thank you. My nephew." He's going through chemo right now. What you said about Danny, I'm going to tell him that story if that's okay." Keanu clasped the man's hand in both of his own. "Of course. What's your nephew's name?" "Paul, he's 12. "I'll be thinking of Paul," Keanu said, his eyes conveying a depth of understanding that needed no further words. What neither of them knew was that across the city, across the country, and soon across the world, something extraordinary was happening. The interview, or more specifically the moment when Keanu revealed the true meaning of his cross necklace, was already spreading online like wildfire. Lisa Chen, a college student in Boston, was up late studying for finals when her roommate burst into their dorm room. "You have to see this," the roommate insisted, thrusting her phone into Lisa's hands. "It's Keanu Reeves. It's everywhere." Lisa, exhausted from hours of cramming, reluctantly looked at the screen. 5 minutes later, she had forgotten all about her exam. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice hushed. "That was so real." In a world of carefully curated social media presences and scripted celebrity moments, what she had just witnessed felt almost jarring in its authenticity. Her roommate nodded enthusiastically. "I know, and look at the comments. Everyone's feeling the same way." Lisa scrolled through the thousands of reactions pouring in. People sharing stories of their own meaningful objects, of losses they'd experienced, of moments when a simple conversation had changed their perspective. The interview had somehow given people permission to be vulnerable in a space usually reserved for snark and superficial commentary. "I'm sharing this with my dad," Lisa decided, forwarding the clip. Her father, a hardened skeptic about anything related to Hollywood, would normally roll his eyes at celebrity interviews. But this felt different. In Chicago, news producer Ray Thompson was just getting ready for bed when his phone buzzed with a message from a colleague. "Check trending topics now." Ray, who had been in the news business for 25 years and considered himself impossible to surprise, felt his eyebrows raise as he looked at the surge in activity around Keanu Reeves's name. Pulling up the clip, he watched with growing interest. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered as the segment ended. He immediately composed an email to his morning team. "Lead with this. Get reactions. Find out more about this Danny kid if possible. Respectfully." He added that last word after a moment's thought. Something about the story demanded a different approach than the usual sensationalized coverage. Across the hall, Ray's teenage son was already watching the same clip on his phone, having discovered it through a completely different channel. The algorithm that typically fed him gaming videos and sports highlights had interrupted his usual content to show him something it deemed unmissable. "Dad?" he called out. "Have you seen this Keanu Reeves thing?" Ray stood in his son's doorway, surprised. "Just watching it now. Didn't know you followed that kind of stuff." His son shrugged. "I don't, but it's everywhere," and it was. In the space of hours, the clip had jumped across the usual boundaries of age, interest, and demographics that typically contained viral content. People who never followed celebrity news were sending it to each other. Groups that normally disagreed on everything were unified in their reaction to the unexpected moment of humanity that had played out on late-night television. In a hospital room in Philadelphia, a night nurse named David was doing his rounds when he noticed one of his patients, an elderly woman, watching something on her tablet with tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Reynolds, are you all right?" he asked, concerned. She looked up, almost embarrassed to be caught crying. "Oh, I'm fine, dear. Just watching this interview with that actor, the Matrix fellow." David had already seen the clip during his dinner break. "The Keanu Reeves interview?" "Yes, that's him." She wiped her eyes. "Reminds me so much of my late husband. He carried my picture in his wallet for 50 years. Wouldn't go anywhere without it. Said it kept me close when he was traveling for work." She smiled at the memory. "Objects that hold meaning. That young man understands." David checked her vital signs, noting with professional satisfaction that her blood pressure was better than it had been earlier. Sometimes it helps to remember we're all going through something, doesn't it? "Indeed it does," she agreed. "Indeed it does." In Los Angeles, Tom Carter was having a very different night than he had anticipated. After the show, he had declined the usual invite to grab drinks with the writing staff. Instead, he found himself sitting alone in his home office, watching the interview again on his computer. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications. Network executives, other celebrities, friends, and even his typically critical mother-in-law had reached out. The general sentiment was shock. shocked that Tom Carter, the king of sarcastic takedowns, had shown genuine remorse on air, and more surprisingly, admiration for it. Tom took a sip of whiskey, considering what had happened. He had built his brand on being the guy who said what everyone was thinking but were too polite to say. The guy who cut through celebrity nonsense with sharp humor. The guy who was never, ever emotionally vulnerable. And yet, in one unplanned moment, he had broken character completely. Instead of feeling exposed or regretful, he felt strangely relieved. His wife appeared in the doorway, watching him with curious eyes. "You're trending above the president," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "How does it feel to be famous for being nice for once?" Tom laughed, a genuine laugh without the edge that usually characterized it. "Weird, really weird." He swirled the ice in his glass. "But not bad." She sat on the edge of his desk. "I saw the whole thing." "What happened out there, Tom?" "That wasn't in the script." He considered the question carefully. "I don't know exactly. Something about his story. About Danny." He set his glass down. "I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities. They all have causes, charities, sad stories they trot out when they need to seem relatable. But this was different. He wasn't trying to make himself look good. He was just honest. And it caught you off guard," she observed. "Completely." Tom closed his laptop. "You know what's really strange? I've gotten more positive feedback tonight than for any other interview I've ever done. And all I did was shut up and listen for once." In a small apartment in New York, a struggling actor named Michael watched the interview for the third time, studying Keanu's every expression, every gesture. Not with the usual envy he felt towards successful stars, but with a new kind of attention. "That's it," he said to himself. "That's what's been missing." His roommate looked up from the couch. "What's missing?" "Authenticity," Michael replied, still staring at the screen. "Everyone in this business is so busy trying to project an image that they forget to be human." His roommate, another actor who had been in the city 2 years longer and had grown correspondingly more cynical, scoffed. "Yeah, well, easy for Keanu to be all authentic. He's already made it," but Michael shook his head. "No, I think maybe he made it because he's authentic, not the other way around." He rewound the clip to watch the moment again when Keanu spoke about Danny. There was no acting there. No performance. Just genuine emotion carefully expressed. "People can tell the difference," Michael continued almost to himself. "They can feel it." His roommate shrugged and returned to scrolling on his phone. "Well, speaking of feeling things, I'm feeling hungry. Want to split a pizza?" But Michael barely heard him. He was thinking about his audition tomorrow. An audition he had been planning to approach with all the techniques and tricks he'd been taught. Now he was reconsidering everything. By morning, the interview had been viewed over 20 million times. News programs that typically led with political crises or economic forecasts were opening with discussions about Keanu Reeves. Tom Carter and the unexpected moment of authenticity that had resonated with so many. On a morning show in Atlanta, a panel of commentators debated why the interview had struck such a chord. "It's because we're starved for genuine human connection," argued a cultural critic. "We live in a world of filters, both literal ones on our photos and metaphorical ones in our interactions. Seeing two people have a moment of real connection, especially in a setting as typically artificial as a late-night talk show, is like water in a desert." "I disagree," countered another panelist. "It's simpler than that. It's about seeing someone stand up for their beliefs without attacking others." Keanu didn't get defensive or angry when his faith was mocked. Instead, he opened up and shared something deeply personal. That's a model of communication we rarely see modeled in public discourse. "I think you're both missing something," said the third panelist, a psychologist. What made this moment special was witnessing growth in real time. We saw Tom Carter transform from cynical mocker to genuine listener in the space of minutes. That's powerful because it gives us hope that meaningful conversation can actually change people's perspectives. As they continued their analysis, viewers across the country were forming their own opinions, sharing the clip with loved ones, and continuing to spread what many were now calling the Keanu effect. Reminder of the power of authenticity in a world that often seemed to reward its opposite. 3 weeks had passed since the now famous interview, and Keanu Reeves was sitting in a quiet corner of his favorite bookstore in Los Angeles. The place was small and family-owned, with worn wooden shelves and the comforting smell of old paper. It was one of the few spots where he could usually browse in peace, recognized but respectfully left alone. Today was different. The elderly owner approached with a tentative smile. "Mr. Reeves, I hope I'm not disturbing you, but—" She hesitated, clutching a book to her chest. "My grandson is in the hospital, leukemia. He's been having a rough time with the treatments." Keanu set down the philosophy book he'd been looking at. "I'm very sorry to hear that. After he saw your interview, he started wearing this little wooden cross his father carved for him. Says it helps him feel brave." She blinked rapidly. "I wondered if you might sign something for him." Without hesitation, Keanu stood up. "I'd be happy to. What's his name?" "Christopher. He's 9. As Keanu wrote a personal message in the book she'd brought, he realized this was the 20th similar interaction he'd had in the past week alone. Parents, grandparents, siblings of sick children reaching out to share how his words about Danny had resonated with their loved ones. Fame wasn't new to Keanu. He'd been recognized in public for decades. But this felt different, deeper, more meaningful. People weren't approaching him as a movie star or action hero, but as someone who had shared something genuine that touched their lives. When he finished signing, the bookstore owner looked at him with grateful eyes. "You know, my husband and I have had this store for 42 years. We've seen all kinds of celebrities come and go. But what you did on that show," she patted his hand, "that was something special." Keanu thanked her, feeling that familiar mix of appreciation and slight embarrassment at direct praise. As he left the bookstore, he noticed a few people on the street recognizing him, phones discreetly raised to capture his image. This wasn't unusual, but their expressions were different. Less excited by celebrity sighting and more respectful, thoughtful. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from his agent. "Call when you can. Tom Carter's people reaching out." Across town, Tom Carter was in the middle of a production meeting for his show. The atmosphere in the writer's room had shifted subtly since the Keanu interview. The team was still cracking jokes and pitching ideas, but there was a new undercurrent in their discussions. "For the Mitchell interview tomorrow," one writer was saying, "I thought we could do the usual political zingers, but maybe end with something more substantive about his charity work." A month ago, Tom would have rejected this immediately as boring television. Today, he considered it. "Let's try it," he said, surprising the room. "But keep the first half sharp. We're not turning into a feel-good talk show overnight." His head writer gave him a knowing look. The Keanu effect strikes again. Tom rolled his eyes but didn't argue. The phrase had become shorthand around the office for the subtle shift in their approach. Still funny and entertaining, but with room for moments of sincerity. The truth was, the Keanu interview had done more than go viral. It had transformed the show's ratings. They'd seen a 40% jump in viewership that had largely sustained in the weeks following. Letters and emails poured in from viewers who had either returned to the show after abandoning it years ago or discovered it for the first time through the viral clip. More surprisingly, guests were specifically requesting to come on. A-listers who had previously avoided Tom's notorious mockery were suddenly available, drawn by the possibility of having a moment of genuine conversation amidst the comedy. As the meeting wrapped up, Tom's assistant approached with a tablet. The network sent over the early numbers for last night's show. Best Tuesday in 3 years. Tom nodded, pleased but thoughtful. The success should have felt like an unmitigated win, but it came with an unexpected weight of responsibility. People weren't just tuning in for laughs anymore. They were watching for those unscripted moments of connection that couldn't be manufactured or forced. Also, his assistant added, "Any word on whether Keanu has responded about the charity special?" "Not yet," Tom replied. "But keep checking." At a rehabilitation center in Chicago, a physical therapist named Alex was working with a young patient who had lost the use of his legs in a car accident. Recovery had been grueling, and lately the 16-year-old had been losing motivation. "I saw that Keanu Reeves interview," the teen said between difficult exercises. "The one about the kid with cancer and the necklace." Alex nodded, supporting his patient's weight as he attempted to stand. "Yeah, pretty amazing, right? Made me think about stuff differently," the boy continued, grimacing with effort. "About why we hold on to things." Alex waited, letting him gather his thoughts while he worked. "I kept my grandfather's watch after he died," the teen said. "But after the accident, I was so angry I threw it against the wall. Broke it completely." His eyes showed regret. Watching that interview, I realized I shouldn't have done that. Those objects, they're like connections to people we care about. It's never too late, Alex suggested gently. Maybe you could get the watch repaired. The boy nodded, a new determination in his face as he pushed himself to stand for a few seconds longer than yesterday. That's the goal. Stand long enough to walk into a repair shop myself and get it fixed. These kinds of conversations were happening everywhere. The interview had somehow opened a door for people to discuss things they usually kept private. Their meaningful objects, their personal losses, their struggles with faith and doubt. It had given people a vocabulary for talking about something deeply human that wasn't often addressed in daily conversation. In New York, a prominent religious leader was being interviewed on a news program. "What's your take on the Keanu Reeves interview that everyone's still talking about?" the host asked. The religious leader, an older man with thoughtful eyes, smiled. "I think it shows something powerful, that symbols matter not because of what they are, but because of the stories and connections they hold. Some have criticized Reeves for not being traditionally religious despite wearing a cross," the host noted. "And that's exactly what makes his message so important," the religious leader replied. He didn't claim to have all the answers. He simply shared his truth, that this symbol reminded him of a brave child and a promise to remember what matters. There's profound wisdom in that humility. Similar conversations were playing out in universities, in online forums, in dinner table discussions. The interview had somehow created a bridge between people who normally occupied different sides of cultural and religious divides. 2 months after the interview, Keanu Reeves stood backstage at a charity event for children with cancer. The organization had reached out to him after the viral moment, asking if he would make an appearance at their annual fundraiser. Without hesitation, he had agreed. What he hadn't expected was that Tom Carter would be hosting the event. "Nervous?" Tom asked, adjusting his tie as they waited for the program to begin. Keanu shook his head. "Not really. It's for a good cause. Unlike my show, which is just for ratings," Tom said with self-deprecating humor. "Your show brings people joy," Keanu replied sincerely. "That matters too." Tom studied him for a moment. "You know, I've been in this business for 15 years. Interviewed presidents, movie stars, rock legends. But that night with you was the first time I felt like I was having a real conversation on television." Before Keanu could respond, they were interrupted by the event coordinator. "2 minutes, gentlemen." As they prepared to walk on stage, Tom noticed Keanu touching the silver cross that still hung around his neck. "You still wear it," Tom observed. "Every day," Keanu replied quietly. "Have you been back to visit Danny's family?" Keanu nodded. "A few times. They're doing okay. Hard days and good days." The stage lights brightened and they could hear the audience applauding in anticipation. "Ready?" Tom asked. "Ready," Keanu confirmed. As they walked on stage together, the applause intensified. Many in the audience had donated specifically because of the viral interview moment. Some held up their own meaningful objects, lockets, bracelets, worn photographs, inspired by Keanu's story about Danny's cross. Looking out at the crowd, Keanu felt a complex emotion, gratitude mixed with humility. He had never intended to create a movement or spark a national conversation. He had simply shared something true in a moment when it would have been easier to react with anger or defensiveness. Tom stepped up to the microphone. "Welcome, everyone. A few months ago, I made the mistake of mocking something I didn't understand. Tonight, I'm proud to stand with Keanu Reeves to support an incredible cause." More applause filled the room. "But before we begin," Tom continued, "I want to share something with all of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, battered wristwatch. "This was my father's. Like Keanu's cross, it reminds me of someone who mattered. Someone who taught me important lessons I didn't always listen to." He held up the watch. "Tonight, in honor of all the children we're here to support, I'm donating $1 million to the foundation. $1,000 for every day my father wore this watch while fighting his own battle with cancer." The audience rose to their feet, moved by the unexpected personal share from a man once known only for his sarcasm. Keanu stepped forward and, in a gesture that would create yet another viral moment, placed a hand on Tom's shoulder in support. Later, as the event concluded and millions had been raised for the Children's Cancer Foundation, a reporter caught Keanu as he was leaving. "Mr. Reeves, a quick question. How does it feel to have created such a powerful movement with just one interview? Keanu paused, considering his words carefully. I didn't create anything, he replied. I just shared something real, and it turns out that's what people were hungry for. He touched the cross at his neck. We all have these objects, these stories that mean something to us. Maybe we just needed permission to talk about them. As he walked away, the silver cross caught the light, a small, simple object that had somehow sparked a moment of greater human connection in a world that desperately needed it.